evening. The meeting will come to order. I see we've once again attracted an enormous crowd, and we invite Selectman Brown to please come forward and join us, if you would.
Forward as I can come.
Yeah.
There's no seats tonight.
It's going to have to go to the podium.
Oh, no, stand up, just pull a seat forward. Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, don't be an isolate.
Can you hear me now?
It's a lot easier than getting up and down every time you need to run.
Yeah, be one of us, as you were.
Move over.
Get up there.
It's almost like they knew
Yeah.
with the name tag.
True.
Oh, I gave you a wrong one.
Planning.
Right, that's planning.
Okay, how many of you brought your books in so you have today's agenda rather than last time?
It's all the same material. So we just didn't get to the last 3 or 4 items on the agenda.
Right, we're starting with tiny houses, tiny homes.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
but it is a public meeting, and we do have an order. First thing is public comment. Mr. Brown, do you wish to say anything?
I'm just happy to be here.
We're glad to have you. In that case, minutes, Paul.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the meeting minutes of February 11th, 2025, with the corrections from Bob Leary.
Second?
Okay. It's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Now, tonight, we're having a discussion, and the good thing about this is we never get a chance to meet unless it's a public meeting. So this is our chance to actually know what we as a group think. And that's the purpose of this meeting, is to find out what do we think, in the plural, rather than what do individuals think. So we're going to be discussing, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 particular topics. I hope that we get to them all. And I asked Jed if he would please give us an introduction to each one as we start, so we begin with a common understanding of what the state was thinking.
So if I may, the 5 items on your agenda for tonight. I'll just list them for the good of the listening public. So we've got tiny homes that you want to discuss. You want to discuss the starter home bylaw, transfer of development rights, inclusionary zoning, and multifamily zoning. And then, of course, we've got the town snow plowing and trash pickup policies, which are included in your book. And then, Charlotte, you wanted to discuss some outdoor lighting components.
Right.
So to start off, the tiny homes discussion item, as you know, the legislature passed the Affordable Homes Act. As part of that act was an inclusion or an allowance for communities to consider themselves or be designated as a seasonal community. That seasonal community designation carries with it the requirement to adopt a zoning bylaw that would allow for tiny homes. And tiny homes are defined, and I'm reading from the material in your packet. It says a tiny home is defined as a detached structure containing a dwelling unit containing 400 square feet or less in floor area, excluding lofts. So essentially, my understanding of the legislation is that the seasonal community designation is meant to identify communities that have a seasonal population change, right? So Falmouth is one of those communities. It's clearly a tourist destination in the summertime. Yeah.
Except we apparently didn't make the 35% cut.
Correct. So there's a first pass of communities that automatically get in, and our understanding is that there's a committee at the state level who is determining how the other communities on the Cape might apply to become a seasonal community. So let's pretend Falmouth does that and says, yes, we'd like to be designated. One of those requirements is to adopt a zoning bylaw that allows for the construction of tiny homes. So that is sort of the lead-in, the preface to your conversation. It's ambiguous as to what else would be required in that bylaw, but essentially you would be allowing for structures 400 square feet or less.
And is there any incentive for seasonal communities to do that?
I'm unaware of some. I don't know as of yet. My understanding is that's still being worked out. What are the incentives of becoming a seasonal community? So more details are forthcoming. But tiny homes has been an initiative across the country for a while. But as we talked about at the last meeting, you can currently, if a property owner really wanted to, they could build a 400 square foot primary dwelling on their property if they really wanted to. So in essence, although you don't designate tiny home as a use, it's essentially allowed currently, as are ADUs. ADUs, you can go up to 900 square feet, but it doesn't require you to. So you could essentially create a 400 square foot ADU if you really wanted
So
to.
we have no regulation in our zoning laws about the smallest size you can have.
Correct. And there's no reference to a tiny home in our zoning bylaw currently.
Okay.
Well.
So now we're open for discussion. Jim?
Well, I have a question. When they're talking about tiny homes, do they really mean a one little house on a lot? Or are they talking multiple houses on a lot? Because for me, it really doesn't make sense
To do one.
to do one. The land values, it doesn't make, and no one will ever do it. When you have an average lot cost is probably about $200,000, and you want to put a little teeny house on it, economically, that is stupid. And so I want to see where this conversation's going. Are they, I think you almost have to say tiny homes multiple, like 4 or 5, or
Correct.
3 or 4. And then we could have that discussion, and the only thing I'd let everyone else talk about, but it's almost like Back to the Future. Cape Cod used to do this all the time, a long time ago. And it's kind of, we didn't do it here that much in Falmouth, but Dennis and all those other towns had tiny homes everywhere. Anyways, I needed the clarification on what we're talking about.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of detail right now in the state law. I think, just like accessory dwelling units, there are rules that were just released. In fact, we just received a model zoning bylaw for ADUs a few weeks ago. And I think that's likely to be trickling out as we proceed forward as to what a tiny home bylaw might look like. But it is something that the town probably should consider, or at least this board should consider, based on the fact that there's a lot of interest in designating Falmouth as a seasonal community. So it's something that we should, and we can certainly do some research on any other jurisdictions that have adopted a tiny home bylaw to see what other people are doing.
Anyone on?
Yeah, so the only way it would work is if there are more than one unit on a lot. So where can we do that? Could somebody in my neighborhood in Hatchville with a half-acre lot put 5 or 6 tiny homes that are permanent structures and have a shared septic system? Would we allow that? Because then you start getting into trailer park territory. I would rather see 4 or 5 tiny homes on a lot as opposed to a big, huge trailer park. Or we could have an RV park with the trailers like on Sipawissett, if we're looking for seasonal accommodations for people. And again, where do we put that, and who's going to manage it? Does the town have a piece of land that we could put a bunch of trailers on for seasonal workers and rent them out to seasonal workers?
Anyone want to contribute to the conversation?
Yeah, my concern with the tiny homes issue is, there's a reference in here to movable tiny homes, which appears to be motorhomes, trailer parks. We have a neighbor who has a lot of trailer homes, and I don't think that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. It says if you have a movable tiny home, you have to be registered for motor vehicles, Department of Motor Vehicles.
If it's on
But it seems to
wheels.
open the
It
door
has to be
to
on
mobile
wheels.
homes.
It has to be on wheels, Paul.
Yeah.
That's what?
It has to be on wheels to make it a motor
Yeah.
vehicle, not just the size.
True.
Yeah.
But are we open to mobile homes?
So then it becomes, what's the difference between a trailer and a tiny home? You know, so if we were going to have a tiny home development on a piece of property, then they would not have to be mobile. They would have to be permanent structures. Because then you're looking at water and septic. I mean, you've got, supply these units with water, and you have to have some sort of septic system, whether it's composting toilets or whatever.
Ms.
John?
Richard, do you have any examples? Any counties or states that have done this successfully?
I don't.
recently?
No, I don't. But we can certainly look into it.
I actually have read about these several years ago. This is not a new idea.
Right.
And I have no idea how far it's spread, but the one that I read about that sort of caught my imagination was in outside Seattle, Washington. And I don't remember how big the lot was, because I wasn't thinking about that at the time, but they had built them at the periphery of the lot. It was a sort of an in-town lot, and they had the little tiny houses around them, and each one had a little porch, and the whole middle of it was a common area.
Yeah.
It was really charming.
Yeah.
So Mary and I are looking at it thinking, wow, that'd be great to retire to that, and we could do it, a bunch of us could get together, and it would be all our pals, and we wouldn't have to be driving all over town. It just seemed like a really good thing to do. And the fact that the state hasn't defined it doesn't stop Falmouth from trying to define it if we wanted to make it possible, and switch in some of the other ideas that are scattered throughout the new law. Some of them deal with modular homes, so instead of building houses one by one by one, you get, so you can do that. There are other ways that you can cut down the expense of doing it and make it possible. But we could define it here. We don't have to be restricted by what the state's saying. It doesn't have to be 400 feet, which seems like, I wouldn't have my own bedroom. I don't like that. So you could make it the size you want and have the rules that you want if we wanted to do it. John?
I think the other option would be, for this community in particular, if we wanted to take a certain section of town and rezone it to 5,000 square foot lots on the sewer, like we did with mixed residential commercial overlay district. Take a certain section on the sewer and allow 5,000 square foot lots. Then you could put a 400 square foot house on that.
Is there any land available for that?
I don't know, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I think that, not just for our community, but maybe that's what the Commonwealth is thinking about for other communities. Maybe in a city or, an infill project.
Yeah?
Or something. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense for
No, it
us.
doesn't. It doesn't. As it stands, it really doesn't.
So, that's my
Well,
2
unless
cents.
somebody did have an acre and they wanted to put several of them on there, kind of, I envision like the old fish camps that you'd have up in Maine with all the little cabins around. That's kind of what I envision.
Pat?
Yeah, a lot of what we're doing right now, or should be doing, I think, is blue skying. And I know a number of years ago, I thought it exactly like you were saying, that maybe you'd have like a meeting house or something in the center of it too, that might have a guest bedroom, so that would reduce the size of the house that you'd want. But 400 square feet, I think, is too tiny to live comfortably in. I don't know what the optimum size
It's
would
like a
be.
studio apartment. I mean,
Yes.
My first floor is only 400 square feet.
But it depends upon who we're trying to encourage to live in this
Yeah.
little camp area.
Well, we're trying to keep things affordable, and we've always talked about letting the market kind of help us with that. So if you're looking at small units that are more affordable and more towards transient workers, seasonal workers, as well as people who first move here, that may be single and need a
Well, I
place.
see it as a really great thing for people who are downsizing. They
Yeah.
want to stay in town,
Yeah.
but they no longer want to take care of a big house. Doug?
You might want to consider also, you could have like a tiny home overlay district and try to
Yeah.
define that. Maybe there's some places that could fit, but you could also maybe consider it as an accessory to an existing house.
Yes, you could. You could.
Yeah. It would then be accessory dwelling unit, but yeah.
Yeah,
It's just a-
expanded.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Jim?
I think for the size, I think 400 is too small. I think on the list is also starter homes.
Right.
And I would like to, everyone just visualize what a 30 by 30 house is. It's 900 square feet. What's this room?
Probably
More
close
like
to that.
50
Probably
by
about
50?
that, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. A lot of these can fit on an acre,
they could.
a lot of them, and they could have the proper setback with the communal system, and it also would be moving in the direction the state's talking about. I don't think we need to go down to the tiny homes that start, anything that sounds like a mobile home for me is out of the picture for Falmouth. I mean,
Yeah, I agree with you.
I'll die on that hill.
Yeah.
But I think smaller houses, we've always said, let's just make them smaller to try to make them more affordable. And I'm, looking at the 30 by 30 is a pretty small house. I talked to a lot of people, I couldn't, they say, oh, it's too small for me, but if you're starting off, that's a 2-bedroom house with a kitchen and a living room and a porch. That's not bad.
Right.
So, I think.
Particularly if you do the common area.
So with kind of merging it's all, you can't, normally you don't have more than one accessory part to a structure. But if we just called it a smaller house thing and looked at the 900 feet or something like that, something that's restricted to 2 bedrooms, and seeing how it can work on our land would make more sense. I would definitely don't want anything that sounds anything like a mobile home. That just, not for me.
Let me ask you all a question. Does it look to you as if tiny homes is enough of an idea, that we like it, that we ought to be working on developing it more fully to deal with it?
I'd like to. Now, the 400 square feet does not include a loft.
We don't have to stick with the 400.
No, but I'm saying, so
Yeah.
that 400 square feet is not really 400 square feet, because there's a loft that can exist without being counted in that 400 square feet.
Oh, you want a cube, so 400 by 400 by 400.
No, 20 by 20 by a loft.
And a basement.
Why not expand on the ADU and allow more, 1 or 2 or whatever? So let's say you have a garage, then put another unit out behind the garage, or 2 units behind the garage if you got the space and the septic capacity for it. So not restricted to just 900 square foot ADUs.
Well, we could just call them smaller houses too, because it's
Yeah.
hard to call them accessory.
Yeah.
Yeah, we bump into a whole bunch of
Yeah,
other
the
stuff.
definition doesn't work.
Right. We
Call
need a
them
different.
accessory.
So let's mark it down as, okay, we want to look further into this. So we'll call this developable. The next thing we come to is the starter home bylaw, which this kind of bumps into.
Same thing.
Ted, did you want to talk about that one first?
Sure, yeah, it's along the same principle. It's, Jim, to your point, it's getting back to the 1970s when they were building small, single-story ranches and maybe small 2-story capes, 1,300, 1,400 square feet. So this idea, this starter home bylaw, it's General Law, Chapter 40Y. It's somewhat akin to the Mr. Cod district, right? So the idea would be that you have to establish a zoning district within town. It has to be developable up to 4 units per acre. And the structures that are allowed in that district cannot exceed, I believe, 1,800 square feet. There's other provisions in this text that I was trying to remember exactly the parameters, but the basic principle is that you designate an area within town. It's not an overlay, it's an actual zoning district. And you say, within this district, these are the things that can happen, but primarily it's focused on creating smaller structures that are more attainable, just like the one that I bought, 1,300 square foot, 2-story cape. It's nothing fancy, but it meets our needs. It's not overly large. And so that's something that you may want to consider. There are incentives to doing this. So again, it's very similar to the 40R program, where if you adopt this district, you have to go through the state process of approving it, and you can be eligible for incentive payments if you followed all of the rules. So again, there's benefits to establishing that.
Going back to the 5,000 square foot lot, you could put a 12 to 1,400 square foot house on that, and we've done this in Mashpee, where someone donated their backyard, and we put a 1,200 square foot house in their backyard. And we've done that out in the Outer Cape as well.
Well, the way
They've subdivided their property. So,
well, now, anybody in town, by right, can add an accessory dwelling on any lot in town.
Right.
Now, under current state law. This starter home thing, they're saying to do just their rules. It's 1,850 square feet, which is bigger than what we've been talking about so far. But it also says you can put an accessory, which we already knew you could. Then it says you can put up to 5 accessories, and they can be a mix of commercial and residential. So this really is more sounding downtownish. Anyone want to comment on the way the starter home thing is sort of given to us by the state?
It has to have a minimum of 3 bedrooms,
Right.
okay? Now, the 1,300 square feet, 1,400 square foot home, it's fine. We brought our kids up in that, 3 kids. I mean, 2 kids. Just add another kid in there.
We lost one.
There's a tuition you didn't have to pay.
So it's perfectly doable. They're very reasonable. It's a cape, or whatever they call it, a hat. You know, the dormer.
Salt box?
No, it's not.
The-
Gable.
It's under the eaves, the upstairs.
That's a cape.
Is that totally a cape? Okay. Because they had another name for
Dormer
it.
and back.
It's definitely
Yeah,
a cape.
1.5
It's
story.
a cape
Thank
with a
you.
raised roof.
Yeah, well, no, ours, well, yeah, it does in the back. It
Yeah, it's
did.
the dormer in the back.
It's a dormer in the back. It's a larger dormer in the back.
Tom?
No, I was just comment, dormer in back, right.
Yeah,
It was my first home.
yeah, and they're perfectly livable.
Charlie, I have a question.
Yeah.
Jed, you showed me a copy of a bylaw that the Attorney General is looking at.
Correct.
Is that something we've submitted to them as a draft? This number 2 that says that the planning board can approve more than one accessory. It defines accessory as 900 square feet, the whole relationship to the size of the house, meeting the zoning, but more than one. Is that, what's happening with that? Is that, if the Attorney General approves that, is that a bylaw we now have?
Yes. Yes.
So that we could have more than one, and on larger lots, although the only trouble is defining them as accessory is a little bit complicated. The label might have to change, but maybe they're just small houses.
That's essentially what they are.
Instead of,
yeah.
it's this I think if you took away the label of accessory, limited them to I think, first of all, 1,000, I've built a lot of condos, and you can get a 2-bedroom in about 900 square feet, no problem at all, and it can be very luxurious. You can have 2 baths, a big living room combination. I built them, they're not bad. So you don't really need 1,800 square feet, and that's twice the cost.
Yeah.
So if we're really trying to drive the cost down, I think if the state likes the 900 number, we should try to see if we could see that.
Yeah, yeah, 2 units at 900 versus 1 unit at 18.
Right, or especially from talking to John about his experience, having multiple units on a D-night system actually makes it work better. So there might be some really good logic to the nitrogen loading and everything of having 3 or 4, smaller houses on a lot. And I can tell you, I've mapped it out. You take an acre lot, and you want to see how comfortably you can fit 900 square foot houses, they fit on it real easy. They're teeny little squares, when you look at it. So, I mean, I don't know, I think, I'm a little afraid of going down to 400. I think that's too much. I'm also afraid of saying it has to be 1,800, because I think that's too expensive. I happen to live in a 900 square foot apartment, and I have 2 bedrooms and a huge living room and dining room combination room all together, and 2 baths. And this second floor walk up, it's not gonna be good for me when I get older, but it really is a good, I think 900 square feet is very livable. I have tenants that are living in 600 square feet, 2 bedrooms. So I just want to throw in from my perspective.
John,
Are we talking about starter homes now?
we are.
Same thing, yeah.
Because the state gives you a definition of a starter home zoning district.
Yes, they say it's a zoning district. They say a particular number of feet, they give some other requirements, and they will give you a $3,000 per unit incentive, which is too small to incentivize much of anything,
But
I believe.
I'll read out loud a couple of their caveats for a 40Y zoning district. Starter homes shall be a use permitted as of right at a density of not fewer than 4 units per acre of developable land area. That's number one. Starter home district shall incorporate sustainable developments that apply to all starter home developments. Not less than 50% of the starter homes to be developed in a proposed starting home zoning district, excluding ADUs, shall contain not fewer than 3 bedrooms, et cetera, et cetera. The whole thing is laid out for us if we want to adopt a 40Y district. That's your starter home district.
But unlike the
I don't
change
think
in the
I don't think they're giving us the option to make any adjustments to this. Am I correct?
That's my understanding.
Except to the ADU at 900 square feet and 2 bedrooms.
Well,
Multiple ADUs.
under the starter home bylaw,
Right.
yes.
It depends which way you go. There is an alternative to do the ADUs that are 900 square feet and 2 bedrooms. I'm just concerned that the 3 bedrooms, more septic, it's greater density, it's also more expensive.
I'd like to say that the state, this, unlike the accessory unit, the state passed a law and said that you can have them on any lot by right. It's a law. These aren't laws. These
Right.
aren't. These are things that you can consider doing and adopting locally, which means that you can monkey around with them any which way you want. These are really ideas of a way to do something. And if we regard them as ideas, I think it will be easier for us to arrive at something that we think, if we want to, that would be suitable for Falmouth, rather than reading it as if it were a law, because it's not. We could have done these things before they wrote this.
True, so just to clarify, so very similar to how you established the Mr. Cod district, you essentially followed very closely the requirements of the 40R state law. Meaning you came right up to that line, but you decided, we don't want to adopt a 40R district. We're going to do it very similar, but not go through the state process. You could, in theory, do the same thing with the starter home bylaw, but if you wanted to get those incentive payments and fully comply with the state law, you would then have to adopt that.
What would be the advantage to
40Y.
that? $3,000 per unit is piffle.
Well, I mean, it's better than zero. So
Yeah, you could take a mini vacation.
you could, or several mini vacations. But the point is, if you wanted to actually adopt the 40Y, you do have to comply with all the requirements that the state has laid out. That being said, of course, you could say, well, we'll go right up to it, but we'll take out some things and we'll do it on our own.
I just don't see an advantage to accepting what the state laid out.
Yeah. The challenge, I'm sorry.
Doug?
I was just going to say, I always intuitively thought that a starter home for young people especially would be a simple thing to just do a 2-car garage with a room above it, with a bathroom and a kitchen, but it's expressly prohibited in town. We can't really do that. You can't just build a standalone garage. So it's just another thing that, to throw out there for consideration. I don't know if anybody thinks that's a good idea, but I have a friend who actually is living in another town in that same kind of condition. I think it was pre-existing. So he bought a lot that just had a 2-car garage on it. And he's living there, and he's making plans to put a breezeway and a house next to it. But right now, he's getting by with what he has.
The thought that comes to my mind as you say that is, were we to go ahead with something that would be an amalgam of tiny homes, starter homes, but small, affordable, good for young people starting out, good for downsizers, is to not make it so rigid that you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
To have the flexibility to do it. Because I believe in the starter home one, where there was much more of a narrative, it does say you need a site plan. Right. So there'd be no reason not to make it flexible and just make your proposal. But realize these are the purposes that it's serving. To see. Paul?
It's interesting, my first reaction looking at the starter home bylaw was, this is social engineering.
What isn't? Every law
And
is.
is that what we're really trying to do? But it is a district, same as the tiny home district. And I'm not sure why there's a big difference between the two.
I'm not either. I'm not either. Jim?
Well, In a local comprehensive plan, we've talked about infill development. And one of the things, by creating a district is a little powerful, but we also, if we gave flexibility, just to take a look at bigger pieces of land that we have in areas where there's all 20,000 square foot lots, but somebody just happens to have a bigger piece of land with not enough frontage on it, it's totally landlocked, but they could put more houses on it, that maybe that's a special, well, as the accessory apartment says, you could do that. Maybe we could first, I'm a little concerned about taking a whole neighborhood, a whole area and say, okay, this is a district and everyone's gonna be there, as opposed to looking at a comprehensive plan and saying, why don't we look at these extra pieces of land and infill it all where we already have the streets and structure? And I don't think it'd be as devastating as a neighborhood, it kind of just, that go along to the plan we came up years ago, making it fit a little better by just allowing more homes on a bigger piece of land, meeting all the zoning, meeting the Title V, per bedroom. That's why the 3-bedroom gets a lot more expensive. Yeah, the more bedrooms you ask, the septic system goes way up. 2 bedrooms works, and I don't know, maybe we should identify how many big pieces of land are single-family zone that are 2 acres and are also in the, right near downtown in the village areas that we could do the infill.
Pat?
The problem that I know that we're going to face, people will say you're spot zoning. This is in our neighborhood of single-family houses, and now you're trying to put in little cottages, 4 cottages per acre. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that.
We understand, there's no such thing, if it's a town plan, long-range, local comprehensive plan, it's not
I understand that
spot
too,
zoning.
but that's what, we're
Right,
going to
they're
get a lot of
that-
pushback
They always
on
say
it.
that, but it's always
That's all
wrong.
I'm pointing out, but I think it would be a kind of a charming addition to a neighborhood.
Yeah, better than a mega mansion.
Yeah.
Kind of be like a 40B by right.
Essentially.
Actually,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
the thing I didn't like about the starter home thing when I read it is, it sounds like a ghetto, that you have to create a zone just for starter homes that won't be any bigger than this, that somehow the building commissioner can't refuse you a building permit. So this is like a free pass to cheap housing. And it just, I don't think we should do that to
No.
either people who might live there or to the town.
I don't either, John.
So what they're saying is, on this 40Y starter home district, 4 units per acre. So one of the most expensive parts of having a home in our town is the land. Like Jim said, you can't find a lot for less than $200,000 anymore.
Right.
Now, maybe you can, but that's pretty difficult to do. So, and when you use words descriptive like you do, like a ghetto and slum, I mean, we have all the Mira Vistas, 7,000 square foot lots, 7,200 square foot lots, all the Seacoast Shores. There's so many communities in our town that are only 5,000, 7,000 square feet, and they're wonderful to live in. Everybody's living there, and I'm just saying that because we're so used to acre zoning now, we think that you have to have an acre zoning for a house. And what the state is suggesting, if we're going to have affordability for first-time home buyers or even seniors that want to scale down, you have to have more density, or you just can't, it's not going to work. The numbers will not work. And like Doug just said, it's like a 40B by right. And I'll give you an example. There was a 6-lot development that just got completed in East Falmouth, acre zoning. So it was 7.5 acres, 6 house lots approved. The gentleman that's doing the 40B development on Brick Kiln Road is 7.5 acres. 7.5 acres, he's got 28 homes going in there. And you drive in it, it doesn't look like a ghetto. It's not a bad place to. I'm just saying the density. If you take the cost of the land and divide it by 6, or you divide it by 28, that's where you get your affordability. That's why 40Bs work, because you get so much more density per land use.
Because of the land use.
And
But what would make
this
it,
is
John-
something that they're asking us to consider
I'm not against the
to do by
density,
right.
that's not it. Picture if, instead of that 40B developer putting in, I've forgotten now the name he's given to that street, instead of just putting in the street full of however many houses, it's now a zone. And so everything from, say, by the stoplight there by the store, all the way up to 28A, that has to all be only tiny houses. That makes it a ghetto. Then that's all you're allowed to do in this big area, multi-acre area. That's making it more nearly like a ghetto. To have a neighborhood-size thing, because you chose to do it there, that's totally different than restricting it to one kind, one size for a big area, to me. Street by street, fine.
The other thing that's an unknown while we're blue skying is, remember, the health department is looking at new laws. And this is gonna be a killer. It's gonna be expensive. Everybody having to put in an AI system?
If it was a shared system, it would be cost-effective.
It would be, but otherwise.
It would
if
work
you're-
better.
Yeah.
But if you're having to convert whole neighborhoods, it may mean that we're gonna get more land that way.
We're going
that we
to
can
get
do this
pushed into
kind of-
that either way. It's not just the health department. They're just reacting to what they know is coming from the state.
Oh, no, I understand that, Doug. And they're working on how to do it right now. I keep reading about that. They wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for the state looking down.
We wouldn't be doing anything.
I know. Yeah. So that's gonna come into play with what we're talking about here too. And you're right, if we have to put in an AI system, it makes more sense to cluster smaller units around it. So it makes it more palatable for the town, perhaps.
But maybe not as a zone.
I don't think so.
No.
Charlie?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit worried is making the zone. I think, looking at the infill idea that we had for a local conserv plan we had, and doing clusters around our town centers with this public transportation and infrastructure, would make it look like a nice village, as opposed to like driving in neighborhoods, okay, everyone here's got 3,000 square foot houses, oh bang, there's a whole neighborhood. I'd rather see it mixed up a little bit,
Right.
you know, stir up the pot, put bigger lots, smaller lots, scatter it all around and make it, I'd rather live in a more diverse neighborhood, in the one neighborhood where everyone's the same.
That's what makes it a neighborhood, don't you think,
I think
Jim?
so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with the infill idea.
And 40B kind of does that, because
Yeah.
they find a loose piece of land,
Right,
and they make it all work on just that land, where everything else around it is still
yeah.
normal, and sometimes they're so nice, you don't even notice it. You know, it works with 40B.
All I'm suggesting is if we as a community don't come up with some way to increase our density in a way we'd like to see it done,
Yeah.
it's going to be done anyway.
I think we should do all of it,
And
But I think we should do it our own way.
right.
I'll give you one more example. You know, recently, we approved a subdivision in East Falmouth. I recused myself. It's off of Acapesca Road, and what's that road?
Lewis.
Lewis.
Lewis, yeah,
Lewis,
Lewis.
yeah.
It's next.
That's 11 houses.
So, on what, 12 acres, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right next door to it, right now, on about an acre of land, there's 12 apartments being built
Yeah,
under a 40B.
but that's kind of
It's
okay.
abutting it, it's right next door to it. I'm just saying.
I like that.
I'm just saying, it's going to happen. It's happening already, but we're gonna get the density, whether we'd like to have it or not, we're gonna get it. So I think, as a community, we should try to plan for it and try to put it where we'd like to have it, the way we'd like to have it, and then maybe we would have fewer.
It could be that we're in agreement already.
Well,
Have
no, but
you?
here, I just want to point out to John, because I'm very familiar with that subdivision, I looked at it hard. They're all able to put an ADU in their backyard right now, and then 11 becomes 22, by right,
Right, and-
right now.
But they're all acre lots, and
Yeah.
they're all denitrification, if I remember correctly, and
Let's move the conversation a little
Okay.
bit different direction. How many of you have looked often or recently at the Cape Cod Commission's suggestions of how we should do our next master plan, the next local comprehensive plan? And they set out different areas of town for different levels of density, different height, different feel, and so forth. So within each, there might be diversity that you're talking about, but in fact, they still leave areas that are more open land, areas that are tight little villages. I think it would behoove us, as we look at a way to do our own local version of tiny starter homes, whatever you want to call them, to look at that, knowing we have to move in that direction anyway, and realizing you would want to not make everything in Falmouth possible to be identical all over town, to keep different areas of town. Doug?
I thought another thing that was interesting in their planning was the pre-approved plans. You could get a stock list of pre-approved plans that could make it easier for people to build.
Cookie cutter houses,
Well,
plans.
yeah, they can be
No, in a good
historic
way.
looking. They have some
Yeah.
that for historic districts.
Yeah.
Just recommended, simple things that you can look at it and say, oh, that will work. So you already know, it's not, it takes the complication out of the development.
Remember the little company that came here? I say little because I don't know if they've grown since then, where they already had pre-approved ADUs, and you could just buy one of their plans and they put it on your lot. I think that there'll be an industry around providing those houses. Well, and Jim, you brought up right at the beginning of the conversation, the Outer Cape that has sort of little cottage areas
Right.
that were all rental. And when I was a kid, my family would rent one called Captain Carpenter's down in Provincetown, and it was great. You know, you could walk downtown, but you're right on the beach, and you get your own little cottage. And it was, I don't know, it seemed huge to me, but I was, short.
One more thing, just generally, you could consider choosing some areas and reducing from 2-acre zoning to 1 acre, or maybe half acre. Maybe it wouldn't be entire swaths of land, but just some little areas that are like, maybe say close to Sandwich Road or close to Route 151, or some areas that you feel like are more prone to be developed without impacting those people who, because sometimes you've got areas that are really nicely developed and the people are gonna push back if they say, well, I bought because I got 2-acre zoning, that's why I put my mansion here. I don't wanna, have half-acre zoning pushed down my throat. But you could probably find some places where you could reduce that and just give people an opportunity to.
Rather than rezone a section, if you just allow people to subdivide a piece of property randomly wherever it happens to be.
Well, that's rezoning, changing the lot size would be a rezoning.
It's definitely rezoning. Maybe you do it
I
in,
think it is rezoning.
Yeah.
maybe you do it in order to develop the villages, so that each village would have, an area right around that village, so that you grow the village without having it sprawling everywhere. In
And-
England, you drive around and things are looking pretty good in many places, not everywhere, and they had for many, many years, like, half a century, the idea of green belting, so that they could preserve their village. And then there had to be a green belt around it. So if you wanted to build a development, we would call it, it had to be beyond the green belt or find enough land, which there wasn't any, within the village to preserve that village feeling. That would be another way to kind of be sure it's equitable, that we didn't somehow shield the 2-acre zone in one part of town and pushed it somewhere else, which I think you'd have to watch out for.
Well, that's kind of like a cluster.
It is a
Because,
cluster.
you know,
It is a
So if
cluster.
we just increase the density, or we already have, right now, if you have acre zoning and we have 10 acres, you gotta put 10 houses, you put them on 1/4-acre lots and you have a big open land. I mean, we could just redefine the cluster and that would be almost exactly what you're talking about.
Well, what kind of timeline do you think this should be given for Falmouth to develop its greater density for smaller places, smaller uses of, tighter uses of the land? When should we try to get this done?
I think we should start. I think this is the start right now, to develop what we'd like to see. So,
Maybe once a month you could take it up?
Well, and if we want to stay ahead of the state, I think if towns don't start moving, the state is going to start laying down zoning for us. They're already beginning.
I think the ADU is making us do this right away. I mean, the state's already done it,
You could also,
Right.
you know.
you could
That
also
11
take small
that 11
incremental
subdivision
steps.
on Lewis Lane
At
is now
each
gonna
town
be
meeting, you
22
could have
houses.
something,
Could be.
Right.
like maybe you'd come up with an idea to say
Residential,
that
Right.
1,000 feet on either side of Main Street could have some greater density just by right, just by its proximity to Main Street or something, you know. There's a lot of small steps you could take without trying to come up with a giant plan.
Right. That would definitely be easier to do. Paul?
If you remember, several years ago, we came up with a nice project that fit in with the local comprehensive plan in the area where Friendly's used to be. It was a nice development, walking area near all the utilities and so forth. But the owner of the property didn't want to move that route. He was going to do his own thing, and here we are several years later, we still don't know if there's going to be housing in there.
Right, and
But
nothing's
that was a
done.
good concept.
That was Kimco you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Well, I think we picked the wrong size. We limited it to 20 units per acre, and we should have left that more flexible. We could still make it more flexible. At the time it was done, the Housing Assistance Corporation recommended the 20 per acre, but I think that they were, you know, a little off.
Yeah, I think at the time it was the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD, and then they changed over to what they are now known as the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities.
I guess I think I got my information from seminars HAC ran over in Mashpee for a while, so I've just labeled it HAC. I'm sorry, yeah.
But I do think that there are options that the board can consider, even reducing the lot sizes, for example, in the RC district, which is a lot of Mare Vista. A lot of those property owners have to seek a special permit anytime they want to do a renovation. And so if you're reducing those lot sizes to something that's uniform in that district, you not only create, you know, smaller requirements, but you also relieve them of the need to seek out a special permit if they just want to increase their lot coverage, what have you. So that, I think there's just some flexibility that you can start to think about in the bylaw itself. But I do think that tiny homes, especially considering it that it's tied to the seasonal community designation, which I get the sense that the town is interested in doing, that might be something that's more on the forefront than on the back burner, if you will.
Except that if you do that though, Jed, when you're tying it to the seasonal designation, you can't go over the 400 square foot in the loft. And I think we're all talking about, we don't like the 400 square foot concept.
Totally understand. So we would have to figure out a way to understand how others have done it. Because to Doug's point earlier, it could just simply be an overlay district that you're allowing. And it could be in selective areas in town. So you satisfy the requirement of being a seasonal community, but you're not necessarily making it your forefront of creating smaller homes.
I think we
You're
need a better
comfortable.
understanding of any advantages to adopting the state seasonal community
Right.
designation.
Well, honestly, the select board, this feedback was the same. We were a little cautious and wanted staff to look into it more, what we'd be signing up for.
Right, and what kind of control we would have given up in doing it?
Yeah, I'm surprised that you feel like the town is interested to move that way. Where did you get that kind of sense?
Well, there's a lot of folks who understand that it is, you know, our population changes dramatically. And so if there are incentives for designating the town as a seasonal community, again, I say if, then there may be some incentive to do that. But we just simply don't know that yet, because I think the premise was, you know, we'll set up this advisory council at the state level, and we'll sort of figure out what that incentive is. We haven't seen it yet, so it's hard to say that necessarily if it would be advantageous.
I felt like there wasn't really an incentive. It's just, the incentive would be to provide an opportunity for your residents to have more affordable housing. I think that's all.
Basically, yes.
But we don't need to adopt the state's language in order to do that.
Correct.
We can provide that
Do your
from
own
something
thing.
that's been locally designed, approved, and then it's possible to do here. We don't need them, in a way. You know, if they up the money, you might. Tom?
Sean, I'm having a hard time getting recognized.
Jim, we heard a lot from you.
No, I've had my hand up over and everyone else just speaks up and I'm just
Pretty
waiting for
noticeable.
about 3 minutes. I'm trying not to
Your
talk
turn
over
now.
people and I'm just trying to follow the rules and I just had to mention it.
Every time I see Jim's hand up, I try to interject.
Yeah. So anyways, I think we need some numbers to help us. Right now, you can't build on a lot pre-existing unless it's more than 7,000 square feet. I would like to know all the 5,000 or 4,000 square foot lots we have already. And then I'd also like to we've talked about transfer of development rights. Right now, transfer of development rights is limited to within the same little subdivision. If we would open that up to much larger areas, not huge, but the whole part of town, we may find that we can create 20 or 30 or 50 more. I don't know, but I know as I drive around everywhere in Mara Vista, I go, oh, that one's only 6,000 square feet, it's not buildable. And there's a little, you'll see them in Falmouth Heights. But the marketplace does it by itself if they can find it through transfer of development rights. It's not too fast, but it does happen. If we would expand the ability to do the transfer development rights and identify where the smaller lots are, maybe the market could start taking care of some of this for us. And I think that would be more infill in building and as opposed to rezoning a whole area. And I think that should be like a first step of combining an expansion of the transfer development rights, and let's identify all those smaller lots, and let's people figure it out for themselves. I own one, you own one, we swap it around. I mean, I've seen big houses built in Falmouth Heights on small lots. I can point it out to you. Some of them have water view homes.
Bob?
Tom, oh, shoot, I forgot what I was going to say.
Tom?
It was kind of
Okay.
already answered.
The way we've,
No, we haven't talked about the possibility of using land out at the base.
it's not our land.
Well, it's state land, though.
Yeah.
But we could request they divest themselves
Yeah.
of some land.
Yeah,
They're looking for ideas.
yeah. I mean, I look at the end of Sandwich Road there, the Sandwich Gate, that area there, where Mass Maritime has their yard for their boat auctions. I mean, it could be a lease deal, or it could be, something could be done there. And I'm looking at it more as workforce, temporary housing for summer help, as opposed to year-round, or it could be year-round, I guess, too. But,
Is it true to say that this board has for years tried to avoid developing things along 151 because of the aquifer?
Yes, it's true.
And that's right where that is.
Our local
Well,
comprehensive
look what's
plan calls
going on.
specifically for not doing that.
Look what's
Correct.
going on now. And you got 26 acres further up on Sandwich Road. You've got the Saxon thing going, so that ship has sailed as far as developing and traffic along that corridor.
I'd like to see if we couldn't get organized to move forward on the tiny home and starter home, whatever Falmouth's version is going to be, and have some subgroup, as we have done for developing ADUs, developing Mr. Cod. A subgroup agreed to work on it and bring it back to the board. Is there anyone here who's willing to work on this going forward?
I'll work on it.
Bob? Anyone else? Tom? Anyone else?
Only if you win.
That's it?
Paul's looking away. He's a short timer.
I'd be interested in looking at the numbers that I asked for, or the smaller lots, and looking at transfer development rights and see how that could happen organically.
That could play into it?
That could, as opposed, I'd like to look at, maybe it's nothing, but
Yeah, TDR is somewhat restrictive, because, and it's a nice segue into the next topic, if I may.
Yeah. So I'll put
there-
down Jim?
I'm interested in the TDR part.
Yeah, so there is an opportunity to utilize TDR. The problem that I see with it, though, is that it forces the applicant to create a subdivision, where you don't necessarily have to create a subdivision with a TDR. You can simply just transfer development rights from one property to another. You receive credits if your property is within, say, a water protection district, or if it's agricultural land, and you preserve it as such in perpetuity, you receive some benefits to do that. But the problem is that when you take it out of that and you place it into the receiving district, you now have to create a subdivision. And I think that severely limits the ability to use the bylaw. I think the intent, if I'm understanding this all correctly, is that then creating a subdivision, let's create a cluster subdivision so that you can increase your density in a cluster subdivision. You create open space. So you end up getting open space in two areas. And so the town sort of wins because there's extra open space. The issue is that it really hasn't been used because there's size limitations. You have to have a certain acreage in order to make it happen. And then you have to create a subdivision. There's a lot of cost there.
Can I ask a question? How much of the transfer development rights is our own town bylaw, and how much is controlled by state rules and regulations?
Well, it's all through our own bylaw. I don't believe that there's a transfer of development right state regulation that.
So we could change it as we see fit, because to me, when I look at it, it looks like the whole thing is outdated and needs to be redone.
Yes. In fact, there are plenty of model bylaws that deal with transfer of development rights that provide incentives for just doing small parcel to small parcel. Because the intent is to take development potential from a property that you don't want developed because it's surrounded by open space, take that development ability and transfer it to a place where you want it to be developed, in a village, downtown, places that have pedestrian infrastructure, et cetera. So you just transfer it, that's all. And you allow that property to remain in perpetuity as open space.
Well, I'm talking about throwing out our current transfer development. It's too complicated and all those formulas.
Right.
And I'm saying, well, what about if we looked at it, okay, we talked about this, somebody's got a waterfront lot they want to rebuild on it, and it's worth $1 million, but we don't want them to build there. But they have a big piece of land, say, well, you can sell those rights, 5 other houses, find other properties other in town inland and build 5 more houses. And make it flexible so it's not tied down by all those rules, but open to wider areas that solves building where we want and not building where we don't want. And redoing the transfer of development rights to be far more open and kind of throw out that plus and minus. I try to follow that thing. It's really, really complicated.
It is.
I'm talking specifically of examples I've seen happen in Falmouth Heights, because it's all one subdivision originally, the old one, and there's several places where they have these 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lots, and some guy takes, well, I'll give you 2,000 my right, and another 2,000, and boom, a house goes up on it, and some of them are water view houses. I mean, but when you're near the water, that changes to a much higher formula, but if you weren't looking at water view, they'd be more livable and more cost effective.
Is that how they did the one at the end of Acapesket on the water? They've got 3 houses jammed together on what looks like one lot.
I don't know.
You ever go down Acapesket to the water?
Yeah.
I think that's pre-existing.
No.
No?
2 of those, well, one house has been there for maybe 4 or 5 years, sort of slightly pre-COVID. 2 have popped up since.
They match zoning, or how do they do it?
I don't know. You look at it and you say, how do they do
The
that?
only way I know they could do it is pre-existing non-conforming.
And I think the
Yeah,
other,
they-
sorry,
they
Doug
replace
has
houses.
got his hands up now.
I just put it up when you started talking. I saw you getting ready to say something, so I put my hand up. I'm just gonna say, I agree that the whole TDR needs to be redone, and I think there should be 2 clearly distinct sections, one for residential and one for non-residential, because it seems to be more geared towards commercial trade-offs, but that should be, maybe some parts of that could remain and be the non-residential part. But also, we need to think in terms of a whole nother section, which I don't know how it would be funded or what the trade-offs would be, but you got a lot of people in areas like Millfield Street where their lots are gonna be underwater, and you might wanna offer them an opportunity to leave before they have to leave and they walk away with nothing. Maybe they could leave in advance, we could put some green space up, maybe they'd find a place in Hatchville or somewhere where they could, get
That
resettled.
guy in Wellfleet wishes he had some transfer of development rights there.
Yeah, so I don't know how that would be done, the town would have to probably come up with some land, maybe that's where we could go to the military and ask for some divestment of land to provide relocation space for people that are in these endangered areas.
Is the military open to requests?
They're redoing their master plan right now, and they're divesting themselves of potentially 7 acres for a compost facility.
Yeah.
They're looking to divest and downsize. They're outsourcing their utilities and stuff. They're trying to be more streamlined and nimble. So, yeah, they're looking, right now is an opportunity to get some land out there if we wanted to.
Tom?
What's the group, the contact out there at the base?
General Foe, but he's leaving in June. But they have these master planning meetings going on now.
Yeah.
So we could, participate anytime. You could just get notified, get on the list. I'm on the list. I went to one last week before last, about the potential for the composting facility. But the general made it clear. He said, we're in the midst of rethinking our whole master plan, and we're looking for ideas and offers from people. Like Carrie Parcell was there talking about the compost facility, and that's just one idea. So there's a lot more.
Yeah, Jed,
opportunities.
is the town represented in those meetings?
We've gone to one. The Cape Cod Commission had a sort of an introductory meeting with Mass Development, who's sort of spearheading, if I've got this right, spearheading the housing component. That was, I want to say, last summer, but we haven't attended since. Bless you. There was, at that meeting, there was some interesting perspectives from all of the communities. So I'm not quite sure where they've gone with the housing as of yet, but.
I don't think it's got too far.
I didn't think so.
And Mike Renshaw just volunteered to start paying more attention and attending the meetings out there. He was at the one I went to a couple weeks ago.
Right.
So he signed on to start attending in our behalf.
Yeah, it would seem that the town ought to really.
Jack used to participate greatly out there, even though when he went to work in Mashpee and he retired here, he still stayed on as a civilian volunteer out there. But when he passed, we've kind of had a little gap in attendance.
How often do they meet?
I'm not sure if it's exactly, if it's bi-monthly or quarterly, not like every month.
Oh, so
I
it's
don't
not
know the
ours.
schedule, honestly. I just get the notifications and,
So they're in no rush?
no, it's gonna be a multi-year plan,
Be
and
good
they're
to
just
keep
getting
track of.
started.
Going back to our own task right now, it would seem, I think two people working on something is going to put a lot onto those two people, unless you're willing to do that. Maybe we should broaden it so that the subgroup is going to look at all the ideas that come out of now I've forgotten its name, the new study, the law, instead of separating them out.
Yeah,
So
so
that-
you're.
So that if transfer of development rights helps with any one of the others, it could be considered.
Right.
And make them work together. Does that make it wide enough, Jim? If rather than the subgroup doing only tiny homes and starter homes, but say the subgroup is going to attend to the housing production options listed here and see how they can cross-fertilize?
If you keep the transfer of development
Well, it's
rights
right in there.
in there, I would be more interested in that. I'm not really interested in like rezoning whole swaths of land.
Right.
I really think a walkable village, I'm really in favor of their old-fashioned local comprehensive plan where we talked about village centers where you can walk. I love living near town where you can walk. Everybody should have a village where they can go, a meeting place, a church, to go way out someplace else and be bussed into thing is not my idea of where I would want to live. So if you want to include ways that we can incorporate it inside our existing villages and kind of following our existing local comprehensive plan, at least in theory, I'd rather work on
Well, I think we
that.
wouldn't either include or exclude any possibility. It would be, take a look at these ideas that the state has put out and see how we can make some of them or all of them work for Falmouth and help us solve our housing problem. But we don't have to do it necessarily on the state's terms. And if that's true, I would be glad to work on it. Doug, do you want to work on it?
If I'm allowed.
Sure.
I'm not on the planning board.
Yeah, well, last time when we were doing Mr. Cod, Eric Turkington worked with
Used
me.
to
We
be.
met at his office.
Used to be.
So you can have
Former.
citizens, you can, okay. Anyone else want to join?
So when,
When? Well, we're used to Tuesdays.
We used to do Wednesday afternoons. When we did the local comprehensive plan
Yes,
meeting,
but-
we met almost every Wednesday afternoon.
Yes, we did, but now that's when my painting class meets.
Okay. Priorities.
Why
I
don't-
wouldn't mind Tuesdays, Tuesdays kind of.
But we have to be careful.
Oh, wait a minute, no, Tuesdays I tend to work.
More than 3 planning board members, however,
Oh, then
it's a
you have-
posted
No, you
meeting.
just need to post it.
Yeah, it would be a posted meeting. an
Yeah, it'd be a
open
posted meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, you could, so, I mean, technically, there's still a subcommittee of the planning board. I think it's a multifamily.
Yep. No,
Housing.
it's the rezoning.
Yeah, there was a subcommittee established when you were trying to figure out the Mr. Cod district. So, yeah, multifamily housing subcommittee. I don't know exactly the process, but, if you wanted to, meet more than 3 members, then, yeah, obviously you'd want to have a subcommittee and post the agenda and have a public discussion.
Or we could just alternate one person in and out as well. So
That
there's
might
al-
work out
so
anyway.
So there's only 3.
But if we started understanding that we need to have an agenda and post it, we can be sure that we stay on the right side of the rule.
Is it,
Safer is always best.
how many days before the meeting do you need to post it?
48 hours.
48 hours.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to post it anyways, because then the public can say, hey, they're working on this.
Yeah,
Yep.
it works out.
I mean, you could do it, if it works, you could do it, like, say, right before the planning board meeting.
Yeah.
So you could do it an hour or so before the planning board meeting and then just adjourn and then
Yeah,
you're into your next meeting.
yeah.
It's a long Tuesday night, but
Right.
just an idea.
Be like, no supper.
We'll just have to make the regular meeting shorter, that's all.
I think, okay, let's do this. I'll send out one of those little, which of these days you can meet, and we can see who agrees on them. We'll settle it down and get it settled before we meet again as a board, and see who's going to be there.
And that would be April 8th,
Right.
your next meeting.
So we'll get a schedule before April 8th.
We're not meeting April 8th.
Oh, we are?
No, we might have town meeting that
Meeting.
night, so we're not meeting again until April 22nd.
Okay.
Technically, meeting April 7th.
Well, before town meeting, we have
The
that
evening.
small half hour.
Yep.
Okay. So that allows us then to move on to town snow plowing and trash pickup policies. Who requested this?
Next to you.
He's hard to
Got
know.
his hands up again.
Was it you?
Yes.
Go.
We skipped over inclusionary housing.
No, it'll all be bundled together.
Oh, you're not discussing anything
No.
further tonight?
I think that it's fundamentally unfair to say to a development when they're all paying real estate taxes, and they're paying taxes to schools, that they can't get the same services at other houses. And right now, we allow that we do a development, and we bend over backwards to do trash pickup and snow plowing, and to say to any new developments, you're not gonna do that, well, everyone else has the same service, I think that's unfair.
And therefore,
We should allow it, we should provide wherever
It's-
reasonably possible.
It's not up to us. It's the DPW. They set the standard, they set the
Wait a second.
guidelines.
They make decisions on this, they make that decision, not us.
They made their policy, yes.
Well, that can be their policy, but doesn't the selectmen tell them what to do, or does the DPW tell the
They-
selectmen what to do?
They went to the select board with their policy.
And the selectmen approved it. So the selectmen is what we have to talk about. Are you saying that the DPW makes these decisions and not the selectmen and not the planning board?
I'm not saying
They're
any of that.
elected.
No.
But I'm
We
just
do
wondering.
ultimately have to approve policies, but honestly, if I approved that, it got by me, because I had a neighbor reach out to me on Old Main Road and say, I don't understand why we can't get trash pickup. And I said, I don't understand that either. It doesn't make sense. You have an address on Old Main Road, call the DPW and ask them for a recycling bin, and you'll have to wheel your bin out to the road. They won't come down your driveway. And I didn't hear from them again, so I assume they were successful, but I don't know.
I'll give you an example, okay? First of all, I've been watching both the town engineers and the DPW push away their expenses as much as they can and try to save money so they don't have to pay these costs. And I understand why they do that. But I live across from Pin Oak Way, it's a long street. Every Monday morning, I wait till the trash truck at 7 o'clock. They have to back down that road. Beep, beep, beep. They back all the way down and come all the way up. They bend over backwards to provide those people at Pin Oak Way, we're looking a little two subdivision off Sandwich Road, and oh, now you're gonna have to take your trash out of the street. I think that's fundamentally unfair.
They're still gonna do it for those houses that already get it. They're not taking it away.
But that's my whole problem. We're all equal.
But if you build a road to town standards, then they'll do it. It's if you're a private road, they're not gonna do it. If you're a private driveway,
Right.
if it's not built to the standards of the town. Because then if it's plowed,
So then what you're
Took
saying
out
is, then
the
what you're
road.
saying, but that's totally, I'm against that too. Because I'm totally against 40-foot right-of-ways, great big streets, sidewalks on both sides, and make them look like suburbs. I thought we like to have these country little roads, and it makes our town nice. And I think by letting the engineering department and the DPW do planning, we're gonna end up with a town we don't like. It's gonna be really efficient, it won't cost much money, but it's not gonna be a place you wanna live.
I don't think it's a fact that they don't want to do it. I think it might be a fact that they're not able to keep up with everything that is going on. With all the development, they might not be able to keep up with it. I think it's more, instead of you thinking that they're forcing this, I think there's a conversation to be had with why did they do this? And he did present it to the select board.
Yeah, I think that there's a bit of a gray area that we didn't think through maybe, because, like, say, for instance, a big condo development, obviously, they're gonna have to get dumpsters and do their own trash, because you're not gonna have the trash company.
Kendall Lane, guess what? They do trash pickup,
Okay,
28 houses.
I'm just thinking in terms of a big, like,
But
the place I manage in Mashpee, that's a
the
big.
reason why they don't want to do it is because it does cost them money and they need more staff. But if we want to have smaller lots, we just got to get more staff. I just don't cut the services out, add more, give them more money, get them the people they want and make them do it. I just think it's fair to let the engineering and DPW department decide how our town, who gets special services and who doesn't. I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think we should try wherever we can, if it's reasonable, to do trash pickup and snow plowing for the whole town, and not cater to keeping the DPW, give them more money. That's all they want.
I don't necessarily think it's a substandard situation either. So you have to remember, your subdivision regulations require essentially 10-foot travel lanes with a 12-inch berm on either side of the, of the roadway itself, the traveled way. So I think that what the DPW is getting at is, when you create substandard roadways, eventually vegetation overgrows, the roadways themselves are perhaps not maintained, so it's damage to the equipment, it's challenging for them to get in there, it creates an unsafe environment. I mean, the fact that a trash truck is backing down a roadway to get to the trash presents a safety problem. No doubt about it, it's a safety issue.
And
Going on for years, I just
get
think
it.
it's unfair to.
Okay, then, now you're repeating yourself.
I know.
We
But
did-
they are repeating themselves too, and I'm surprised that the DPW and the engineering department are making these decisions, and
Well, they're not, it's really on us, it's on the
Okay,
select
right.
board, because they bring the policies and we approve them. So what I took out of the one I think that we're probably referring to was more with regard to snow removal and truck access, overgrown roads. If they're not being maintained, as Jed was saying, then DPW and the service trucks, they don't want to get all scratched up and damage town property. So that's where they're saying they wanted the right to draw the line on where they're going to serve, and that's going to force people to maintain the roads. So that was the biggest takeaway, but I think I might have missed something on the trash part of it.
I agree in maintaining roads. Do we provide trash pickup and snow removal on Tower Hill Road in West Falmouth?
Is
It's a
that-
private road.
Fire Tower Road?
Yeah, Fire Tower Road. That was, remember how we fought, those people have to take their trash half-mile down all the way
Yeah,
to the
but part
highway?
of that, if you'll recall, the part one up and curved around, it's not even paved, it's just
Right.
rubble.
Mashpee, they have to take.
But
their
don't they
own
plow it?
No, I
Most
don't
towns
believe
do.
they
I think
do
they
so.
do.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
There is a lot of examples of even old cart paths, and the people like on Williams Hollow Way, it's actually a long shared driveway. They all have to drag their carts all the way out to Sam Turner Road, because that's where the trash gets picked up. They don't go down that long dirt
They just
They
driveway.
wouldn't be able
plow-
to fit,
Snow doesn't
right?
get plowed either?
No, they have to do that themselves. It's a private way. It's really a shared driveway. So there's just so many different variations of it, and I think that the town now is
They
trying to
all pay the
say.
same taxes. I just think that somebody needs to look at that.
I
Yeah, but
think they're
they
just
do
trying to
pay
make
the
some
same amount for
definition
their
between
road.
what a
It's
private
substandard
road, that's a
road.
private
Everything about
developer's
it is substandard.
responsibility.
I live on one of them.
And keep in mind, if you would like to see smaller ways, there are ways to do that. There are, you can look into that. It's your subdivision regulations. If you feel like there could be a smaller layout that you're more in favor of, we can explore that with the engineering division to sort of see the pros and cons of going in that direction. But essentially, what we're trying to do is get developers to build to the town standards. It may not necessarily need to have sidewalks on both sides, but at least the travel way is passable for snowplows and trash trucks, so that they can get in there, they can easily and safely take out the trash, clear the snow, and there's no issues. Some of the issue that we have in town too is private ways that are gated, right? And so that obviously presents a challenge when DPW trucks trying to get in there to plow and the gates are down. So it's another layer of complexity that they have to deal with. And so they're just trying to create some clarity and some consistency moving forward.
And that was part of that policy.
Correct.
If it's gated, they don't go in.
I can see gated, you close the gate, you can't expect somebody to plow it.
You
for
can,
Right.
you can.
But maybe we just force them to cut the trees down and keep it wide. I mean, that's a reasonable thing to do, make it more accessible as opposed to cutting down services.
Is it true
Right.
to say that this isn't under the purview of the planning board?
Correct.
Well, it's not necessarily under the
on our
purview of the
agenda.
planning board, but you don't forget,
because
you
you
are
wanted it.
the creators of new roadways in town. So when you're allowing a subdivision to go in, let's use the Lewis Street subdivision example, you want to work with the developer to say, look, the policy of the DPW is that you won't receive these services unless you meet our town standards. So please make every effort to meet those town standards, and let us know if there's a valid reason why you can't. And valid being, it's going to eat up too much space, there's, wetlands in the way, whatever it may be, other than we just don't want to pay for 22 feet of travel way.
And if I could, the development I was talking about on Old Main Road, when the person called me, I said, I don't understand why you're not getting trash pickup. He said, well, apparently it's in our planning board decision that it's a private development and those services are not included. So that's something that, you might want to advise your applicants to say, tell your customers when they buy this house, it's something they should know.
So they need to have the 20-foot wide, or how wide does the travel way to?
22 feet. So 22 feet travel way surface, that's inclusive of two 12-inch berms on either side of the road.
But the paving's 20 feet or 18?
Right, so if you take away, 12-inch on either side, that's 2 feet from 22. You got 20 feet of pavement, 2 lanes, 10-foot travel lanes. Those are tight.
That's the minimum.
That's the Bourne Bridge. That's the
Father
Bourne
Bourne
Bridge.
Bridge,
Yeah. I mean, you're not doing 65.
right.
You're only supposed to be doing 45 over that bridge.
Anyways, I've watched the engineering department push back the way to save their staff money more and more and cut service less and less. I've watched the beach committee lock up our beaches because they don't want to clean them. I've just watched every town committee want to cut their budgets and just restricting services more and more, and I just think it's unfair. I'd rather force the people to build adequate streets and give service to everybody.
Partnership.
Yeah, it has to go both ways, I agree.
Yeah.
But
Definitely something to keep in mind, though, when you're approving the next private development.
So that's what we were talking
is.
about. We've talked about it with Lewis Street. We talked to him about it while he was developing it, so he was aware of that. And there was another. Catawba Lane, yeah, so he knows as well that,
They know, but I
Yeah.
wonder if the residents who buy the,
well, there's only one.
Houses,
The
yeah.
guys in Catawba is only one, but Lewis Street, I don't know.
And they didn't ask for any waivers, so they will be getting
Yeah.
the services.
Right.
Yeah, so it's
So
not an
Lewis
issue.
Street is built to our standards, so they'll get them.
So maybe I'm saying we should fight harder in making the streets more accessible.
Or
If
give
it's
the
20 feet.
owner not the option.
Or we should provide an alternative to the to the width that may be
Yeah.
overwhelming. But the town does make exceptions. The dead-end street that I live on, is 17 feet wide. And it was built that way sometime in the 70s and zoned at that time. So it goes back a ways. And yet the town provides trash pickup. They plow it when they can. They can always, but we don't get much snow anymore, so it doesn't matter. But they certainly provide trash pickup. And I think they make every effort to do it if they can. They certainly have for us, yeah.
I think the fire department has said they want a minimum 18 feet wide. And so I think that should be the
Yeah,
minimum.
13 feet high and
Yep,
and cut
or
the trees.
13 and a half feet, I
And
think
that,
it
we should
was.
make them do that.
Right.
And if the private roads need to have the tree cut, they have to do it. Because the trees do grow back.
Oh, yeah.
And so we need to do that. But I'm just concerned about just cutting off the services. I think we got to
I
find a way
think
to
we've
make.
registered that.
I don't think the intent
We
is to just
understand.
cut them off.
It is a concern, but it also comes to us with each request for a subdivision. We ought to be looking at it.
Can I have
Sure.
another question?
Uh,
Sort of related. Is it possible that this board could choose not to approve private roads and just say, build it to the standard and make the developer apply to be a town-accepted road right from the beginning?
So yes and no, right? So the yes part is, of course you could, but you can't force a developer to designate their road as public. But you could not allow waivers and make them adhere to the town standard and still be a private road.
There's a balance
there
to
are
be struck,
layers.
though. One of the reasons there is not as much building as we would like to see is because of the expense of it. So each time we increase the kinds of things you need to put in to be acceptable, we've increased the expense of it and cut back on the number of times it's going to happen. It was very interesting to me that in the state report, in the newspaper thing, Mrs. Moynihan wrote up a really good short summary that was in this week's Enterprise, saying that the state needs to build 222,000 houses in order to make up for the shortfall in the state, so people will stop outward migration. Well, that sort of is about the chunk of missing federal funding for public housing, interestingly enough. And it's about the money. And each time we make it more expensive, we cut down on the amount of housing. So,
I just want to point out, there's two ways that roads get created. Sometimes it's not always a subdivision. It's a determination of access on an old right-of-way that's been there for a long time. And the state already has a formula right there. It's only 18 feet wide. And it has, then the tree has to be cut 13 feet. And when we tried to do less than that, we got remanded back, and they got it anyway. That, so I was the one that said it's not passable, and the state said you have to let them do it. That was Fire Tire Road.
so we don't need a separate,
No, I'm just saying it's not always a subdivision. Sometimes they're created by the determination of access on old rights of way.
we should have that in writing somewhere.
We do.
No, in our zoning book.
Totally different thing.
Totally different. All
Totally
right.
different thing.
So moving on, I think we've really
John
covered
had
the
his hand
subject
up
now. John?
I just want to clarify that if you put a new road in and build it to town standard, when you complete it, when you're finished with it, you can ask the town to accept it as a town road.
Isn't there quite a list waiting to
You
be
have to go in front of
accepted?
the Board of Selectmen for that.
I've heard there's a long list.
Well, it's a long list, but that's because it's roads that were never built to standard.
Right.
And so it's challenging for the residents to get the money together to do the engineering in the first place, to
Right.
submit to the request, for the request to be accepted. And so that makes for, there's a huge list of old ones, but maybe if it was a new road and you know it's up to standard and all the engineering's fresh, I don't know. I don't know if they would cut to the head of the line or not. That's a good question.
I don't know, but I know when you're completed and the engineering department signs off, you can ask the Board of Selectmen to accept it as a town road.
Why isn't it automatic if it was built to the right standard?
I don't know.
I don't know, but it's something we should probably look into.
Yeah, you
Some
think that would
developers
be.
choose to keep it as a private way.
Because,
They just don't want to create it as a public way. They would rather have it maintained as a private way. We don't necessarily get into the details of that. That's up to the developer to decide. But ultimately, the developer in a subdivision passes that responsibility of maintenance onto the homeowners association. So that in itself can be a challenge for new homeowners who are moving in and don't understand that. But absolutely, if you design the road to town standards and the town inspects it along the way, your chances of becoming a public way are dramatically better than not doing that.
Has been that your experience?
So I just did 2 roads, 2 subdivisions, and when I completed them, I talked to the engineering department, and they said that they would not give a positive recommendation to the selectmen because the road that these 2 new roads are off of is not approved, was never approved. It's built to the town standards, but it was never approved when it was built. So they said that they would not give a positive recommendation.
So it's a catch-22.
In this case, it is.
Well, that makes sense.
Let's say you built a
though.
road off of Route 28, a new subdivision. You would be, and you did it to town standards, you could request,
So you either do it immediately or you can never do it later.
well, like Doug says, if you do it later, the road could be in some kind of disrepair. But why not do it right in the beginning when it's already just got stamped as,
But in your example, you can't do it right at the beginning because the road you're connecting to didn't do it right away.
that's what I was told.
You built the road to the wrong place.
I didn't know until I found that
I
out.
know, you can't know everything.
But in both cases, there are associations that not take care of the road. They collect fees, et cetera, et cetera.
So there's a way around it. There should be an appeal to all of that. Do you know you can appeal without a lawyer for any of the things that a board in town does? You don't need a lawyer. You need 10 taxpayers, and you can address issues like cell towers. So, moving on, outdoor lighting. Now, I had asked for this one because in my neighborhood, suddenly we had a great deal of light that hadn't been there before, and we didn't want it there and had to look into this. And it has turned out, I think you've brought
Be
this up.
driving them crazy. The television hit that
Sorry.
thing.
It turned out, Jim, you had already talked about the dark sky rules, and you each have them in your book. And I found some others, and it was interesting to me that there are already a number of communities here in Massachusetts, 63 municipalities, as of 2025, already have outdoor lighting ordinances, and among them are several Cape towns: Barnstable, Harwich, Truro, and Provincetown, plus Chilmark on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. Around, and I'll hand around this list if you want to look at it. You can I got all of this just by Googling. Here are the Massachusetts towns with outdoor lighting, so there are ways to do it. And there's a lot of information on what are the things that you think about when you think about outdoor lighting. And you're probably familiar with these also, but you can take a look.
I have a question. Can we do that as not part of a subdivision and just make it a bylaw in general so it
Yes,
hits
these are
everybody?
bylaws in these towns. It applies to all the lighting in the town.
We have the right to do it in the subdivision, but we could say it's a bylaw, everybody has to.
Right.
Are there copies of that? You just have to?
I didn't make copies, no. So I think we could have copies maybe for our next meeting.
Sure.
Or we could share them.
Yeah.
But I was running out of toner.
Yeah, if you give us examples, we can take a look at them and try to figure out which ones are zoning bylaws, which ones might be general bylaws, and we can give you a sense for what that difference might look like.
Right, what they would look like. And I'd just like to read the general principles so you can get kind of an idea. The general principles are to minimize light pollution at night, protect residents so that light from somebody else isn't encroaching on your property, ensure safe navigation, whether you're walking or driving, have full cutoff fixtures, meaning they're designed to direct light downwards and minimize light emission above a horizontal plane, so no uplights. Height restrictions, you can't have them too high, so you couldn't put up a tower and now put some sort of big light on your cupola or whatever. Light trespass limitations, people talk about your light trespassing onto my property, into my eyes, and shielding requirements. Specific lighting types, whether or not you can have LED with that kind of glary light that they have. Color temperature, are they going to be warm lights, cool lights? These are all things that are part of many of these regulations. Signage lighting, municipal facilities for town halls and parks and so forth. Lighting zones, so that you might have like downtown lighting, village lighting, residential lighting. and then there's permitting and enforcement. So those are the parts of it. And I guess these will be duplicated and shipped around, so why don't we hand them down?
That's the light piece.
Anyone want to comment on the idea of having lighting regulations for Falmouth?
Is yours? I'd like to see that.
Well, I think it's,
have an issue.
having lived in the town for a really long time, and also been a boater, and really enjoyed sailing Vineyard Sound at night, and now seeing, and also sailed up and down the East Coast, where you go by Atlantic City and New York City, and when you're off coast, you see a loom, the whole sky lights up. You can just see these big bubbles of light. We're starting to develop that in Falmouth. The Quistit development that they've done in Woods Hole, when you sail at night too, and you go by the Quistit development, they have a loom, you can see, it's lit up the whole sky. It's changed everything from the way it used to be. And if we continue doing it, we're gonna look more and more like Atlantic City. And I really am in favor of downlighting, no floodlights, everything on the ground, making it safe, but not up in the sky. And I think that is something, I've heard talk at many plans, they talk, dark sky principles. I've heard all the architects talk about that. I think that should be mandatory across town.
I agree.
My own opinion.
When I stand in the backyard of my place on Shorewood Drive, I can see town at night,
Right.
just illuminating like a glowing
Really?
hub.
Oh, absolutely.
From North Falmouth?
East Falmouth.
East
Oh,
Falmouth.
from East Falmouth.
Yeah, it's on Great Bay, but it's on the upper reaches of Great Bay, across from Falmouth Port. And, especially on a dark night, it's really, really noticeable.
In Quistit, you just see this sort of orange glow.
The loom,
Yeah.
you can see it.
I
If you ever travel the East Coast at night, you can see this, you see the looms going, oh, what city is that, or what town is that? They light up the whole sky. We don't need
I
to do that.
suspect for me, in my particular location that I'm talking about, is because of the mall and the plaza
Right.
are kind of in line
Oh,
with each other.
Right, that's where
Pointed at that.
you're seeing that.
Yeah, John,
Where would this be used if we adopted any of these? Would this be on residential? Would it be on
Everywhere.
I think it'd be for the whole
The
town,
whole town?
the whole town. Well, I don't
Put it
know, we'll
down.
find out. I think that's how the other towns have dealt with it, it's townwide.
You just bring everything down and shine it down. No big high floodlights lighting up a whole field like a baseball field that light up the whole parking lot.
Yeah.
You bring the lights down. You have the lights on the ground, and you don't let it go across the property line. No light trespassing.
Imagine what it's like for the people who live near Fenway Park.
Yeah, I live there.
Moving on,
I know when we do commercial developments,
moving on.
we have control of the lighting on the site. We've been doing this for years.
We have
Yeah.
it, yeah, every commercial development.
But I think before you try to have this be enforced in the whole town, you should find out what other communities have done.
Oh, I think that's our first step, and Jed volunteered to do it for us.
I volunteered the planning department to do it.
Well, same difference.
And it looks right there, right?
Are you going to do site visits for every one of these communities? Is that your
Sure.
plan?
Yeah.
Okay, at night,
Start with Provincetown and make our way.
and
way back.
take pictures.
When he says "we," it means "ye." Huh?
Bob, do you have a comment?
We talking about the lamp post at the end of someone's driveway that has the lantern type of thing? Now you've got to change it so it's a downward light?
Downlight.
You just put a top on it.
Well, they do have tops on them, but the light shines around the sides of it.
That would be up for discussion. We'd
Just
have
don't
to-
shine up.
Yeah, that
we'd have
would
to
be a
review
topic.
those.
I mean, we were raised that lighting is safety. Not only for being able to walk, but also to prevent crime. I don't know, I just,
Dark sky doesn't mean dark land. Dark sky means you're not putting the light up in the sky. You're keeping the light on the land where the people walk.
Pat?
I understand dark sky, and it's wonderful in its concept, but I can tell you, going down Woods Hole Road and trying to find our street that has a street light up there that's cone is like that, you can't see where the street is. That's not safe.
So you haven't gotten home?
I get home. But it's very difficult. The only reason I can see where our street is that one of the neighbors bought some high-intensity reflector tape and has wound it around the poles so you could see where the entrance to the street is, despite a lamp pole. Because it's an LED, it's not safe.
Paul?
I have a personal issue where the lights across the street shine in my house, but only in the wintertime.
Right.
And I've talked to the owner, and whatever you have there might be helpful if I talk to him again, if I can get that.
Tom?
Undecided.
Undecided.
Whatever you do, make it apply to the town too, of course. I mean, it does by default, but it should be written in there,
Right, right.
because we have to lead by example if we're gonna impose something.
Well, we'll get more information, find out what the other towns, particularly on the Cape, are doing, and see where we want to go from there, and how to get there. Okay, anyone have announcements?
I guess I have one.
Oh, okay.
That's not good. Regrettably, I'm closing my art gallery. I can't afford it anymore.
Oh, Jim, I'm so
No,
sorry.
I'm moving my license to Robert Paul. I'm still working on Main Street, but I'm giving up my space. I can't afford it.
Wow.
That's a bummer.
I'm sorry to hear that, Jim.
It was a practical thing. It just, I was really lucky. I made a lot of money on Kendall Lane. I had a huge business. It was roaring fast. But when things slowed down, I can't carry the art gallery on my real estate work anymore. So I rented the office out in 2 days. And another company's going in there, and they're gonna sell art at Home Goods. So it'll be similar, but they won't be running all the public things I did, or having any political things with all the Republican things that I did before.
Or NOBSCA, or all the other things that you did.
I was kidding when I said
Yeah, I
Republican.
know, but that's a loss to the town.
Well, it was fun, but it became, I can't afford it.
I'm sorry.
So it's okay, I've got over it. So, I'm still gonna be working on Main Street, but I just won't be running the art gallery.
Any other announcements?
I have a question that might lead to an announcement to the public. Tom did take out his papers. He was pulling my leg earlier for, I'm assuming it's the 3-year term.
It is.
But there's also a 1-year term open. Does anybody know whether anybody has pulled papers for that yet?
I don't know if he's pulled papers, but I know
I
the
stopped by this
individual who's
morning.
interested.
I stopped by this morning, checked the book.
Nobody
Nobody
checked
yet.
Nobody has pulled papers for the
When's the
1-year
deadline?
seat.
We're running out of
28th.
time.
I think it's the 28th, isn't it?
28th, yes,
To get the
Right.
papers, they
To-
have to be in on the 1st.
by the 1st.
Right.
So that leads to the announcement. Please, people, if you're thinking about the 1-year term, you've got now to do it.
I know a person who said he was going to do it.
It's not in the book.
Not anymore?
No, it's not in the book, that person.
Oh, it may not,
Well, maybe
Other-
if someone sees the vacancy after the election,
It's only a couple more days
yeah,
left.
then we get to a point.
But then what do we do? Because that's not happened before. Do we then have to go the same way we did before when Tom was appointed? So it's a joint select board and planning board appointment to that vacant 1-year.
With the townwide election,
Oh, sure.
I understand that.
so I'm not sure the select board can do that, can they?
I thought you were talking about after the election.
yeah,
After the election,
yeah, if there's a
If
vacancy.
nobody
If there's a
comes in.
vacancy, then it's a joint decision, and it worked.
and of course, somebody could write his or her name in and be the only vote too.
Everyone could write somebody's name in.
Absolutely.
They'd have to accept the nomination.
Maybe Paul doesn't get to leave.
Yeah, one more year, Paul. One more year.
I thought about it, actually.
Did you?
Did you?
Then do it, Paul,
Yes.
please.
You're gonna be bored otherwise.
So we've got a good fallback.
We could, couldn't we, all of us?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
You have 9 signatures right here.
Yeah.
Right, you'd be all
I
set.
need 41 more.
Okay, future agenda items. No,
Work cut out.
there wasn't any general correspondence, so we'll entertain, let's see, our next meeting is actually April 7th, but it'll be very truncated, and it will probably be over at the school
Yes, it will.
where the town meeting's held. So our next real meeting is April 22nd, and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
4:22.